it's hard to talk about anything we can do as we are all safe and warm in our beds, as we view and watch a genocide going from slow motion to fast motion in Gaza. As Brother Osama said, this did not start on October 7th. And the inhumane human rights violations, starvation, oppression, torture of the Palestinian people, specifically in Gaza, did not start on October 7th. I had the incredible privilege of visiting Al-Quds about a year ago. I got to pray in Al-Aqsa, and I got to speak to Palestinians. I got to visit what is called the Cave of the Patriarchs, where Sayyidina Ibrahim is buried. This is in Hebron, where there was a massacre about 2 decades ago. And during my visit, I viewed and saw with my own eyes the kind of oppression that even the images that we get doesn't fully describe. And I'll just share with you one very simple incident that happened in front of my own eyes, and a bus load of Americans with cell phone cameras. Imagine what happens when we're not looking. We were in Hebron, we were leaving, we were on the bus, about to leave. And some children, this kid could not have been 13 years old, couldn't have been older than 13. We were there as the first tourists after COVID, so people did not have any kind of business for at least 2 years. So these children were trying to sell us some souvenirs, and they were trying to get on our bus to sell us their wear, their stuff. And they were approaching the bus to do that, which is very normal. And 2 IDF officers were outside, and there was an argument. Now, the one thing you have to understand about the Palestinian people is they are fearless. So they're not intimidated by the fact that these soldiers literally have machine guns. These are police, supposedly, but they are armed like they are going to war against children. So in front of our eyes, and we have it on video, and I've posted it on my social media, there were 2 officers and a 13-year-old boy. One of them swept his leg so he smashed down on the ground, on the concrete ground, and the other one pointed his gun to his head. And then they let him go. Just a little reminder, just a little pinch of the ear in front of a busload of American tourists with phone cameras in front of us, in our own eyes. So when I hear words like it was unprovoked, not justifying anything, but the idea that the Palestinian people are not suffering day in and day out, and this was not in Gaza. This was in a world with no Hamas. This was in Hebron. This narrative is a lie. And what I actually wanted to share with you, because we all feel so helpless in the face of such overwhelming atrocities, is I wanted to come from a place of what I know about, my expertise, which is actually messaging and narrative. Everything that Brother Osama talked about in terms of strategy and piece of empowerment, though, is on countering the false narrative that is being perpetrated against the Palestinian people and falsely accusing and demonizing the Palestinian people, and in so doing Muslims in general. Because Islamophobia and anti-Palestinian rhetoric are not separate. Islamophobia is the handmaiden in service of anti-Palestinian rhetoric. So what I'd like to share with you is actually a very practical, I hope, set of recommendations on how you and I can counter these narratives with a Western audience. Now, most of us in this room are not going to go on TV, right? And so you may feel like this doesn't apply to me. But if you have a social media account, then you can contribute. If you have coworkers, you can contribute. If you have neighbors, you can contribute. Every single one of us has a part to play. Even if you're engaging with your elected official, understanding how to counter the narrative is essential. Because this is a war of narratives, and it always has been. What we see taking place in Gaza today is the sharp end of a long spear that starts here in the United States, make no mistake. And it's about a false narrative that dehumanizes and justifies. What is the root cause of any kind of racism? Racism does not create bad policies. Bad policies manufacture racism. So when you have a horrific policy that no human being can justify, you have to manufacture consent for it by creating a narrative. So we have to address the narrative itself. Now, I want to start by saying that this is part of our faith. Address people according to their understanding. This is what we are taught. And we know that no one is beyond possibly reaching. So don't overlook the possibility of being able to speak to someone in your life and getting them to see a different perspective. Because you only have to rely on Allah, and He is the one that's going to either open or close hearts. It's not up to us to decide. This narrative and its abuse, as Brother Osama said, is what caused the death, the murder of a 6-year-old Palestinian American boy by his own landlord, who himself said he became obsessed with what was going on in Gaza and was consuming so much media that it drove him with its toxicity to the murder of a child with his bare hands that he used to play with. So when I say that this narrative is toxic and we have to address it, I'm not exaggerating. So the first thing we have to understand is that this competing narrative is not between East and West. It's within the West. The West, the United States or Europe, is not one united bloc when it comes to this issue. In fact, there's a great deal of variation. There's essentially three groups that we're dealing with. One that is already pro-Palestinian, and believe it or not, by a miracle of God, despite the overwhelming propaganda, 10% of the American public is reliably pro-Palestinian all the time. 10%. That in itself is like a mu'jiza. Then you have roughly 45% who sympathize with Israel, despite the one-sided 100% pro-Israel media. They could only get 45% on that side. And then the rest are the fence sitters, the ones that you can sway one way or the other. Now, what shocked me is that this number of people who are pro-Israel, since October 7th, has actually gone up. Slightly, not a lot, but it actually has increased since then. And that is the power. I mean, we can all be like marveling at the fact that that is even possible, but that is the power of media and narrative. Now, I based my remarks today on a document that I was sent that was sort of leaked, and it is the messaging playbook for the pro-Israel movement, lobby, from 2009, the 2009 assault on Gaza. It's written by a man named Frank Lutz. Now, no one here probably even recognizes that name unless you're really inside politics, but he is an incredibly important, powerful man who is considered sort of the godfather, the spin doctor of the right, as well as the pro-Israel lobby. He's the one that created the narrative and the words and the phrases used to manufacture consent for the Iraq War. He did the focus groups. He figured out what messaging worked. So he's a very good at what he does. Think of him as the grand sorcerer. Pharaoh had magicians. This is the head of that, the smoke and mirrors that you need to do insane things and have people agree with it. He's the author of this document that I studied to try to counter it. That's what this is based on. And this is 2009, so it's outdated. There's even more things and more powerful images and words and phrases, but this is what we have to work with. So this is where I'm coming from, and I hope that this kind of research, because it was very well researched, it was based on polling and focus groups and an incredible amount of resources that went into creating this message guide. I hope that very soon we can have something similar in terms of our own investment in this important issue. So here's my recommendations to you. First thing, no one will listen to you, and your target audience is these fence sitters, this middle group. You're not trying to convince people who already decided that they are pro-Israel to come out of that. That's a waste of your energy. But there is about a third of Americans, give or take, that are willing to listen to some degree. So the first thing you have to understand going on for 2,000 years. And there's just no solution. It's just these people fight each other, they've always fought each other, it's part of their, their faith. And we just, and everyone has problems, each person has made mistakes, and why can't you just get along? That's the starting point. So the first thing you have to establish is you have to start with empathy for the common humanity of all. If you are seen as not having a recognition of, which is not a lie, we have a recognition of everyone's common humanity and right to life and security. But that's what you have to establish to begin, even to have someone listen to you. Remember, messaging is not about what you say, it's about what they hear. And this is the sunnah. We always start with empathy for everyone's common humanity. You then have to establish common values. Palestinians want what we all want. They want safety, freedom, and a better future for their families. These are very basic, simple things, but they have to be established first off. The third thing is you have to emphasize how different Israel is to the US and Europe. How different it is. That unlike the US, where we believe in equality regardless of religion, in Israel the law is written to literally have two classes of human beings. One set of rights for Jewish Israelis and another for Muslim and Christian citizens of Israel. Forget about the occupied people. In every aspect of life, from the job you have to the home you can buy. And this is for the citizens of Israel. Imagine how occupied people are treated. No, this idea of common values, the only democracy in the US, these are all messages that are very targeted, and you have to counter them because it's simply not true. These two countries are not similar in their actual structure and value system. I'm talking about espoused values here. Fourth, speak to young people. Keep using social media, but also, if you can, talk to everyone else. So I'm going to give you one really interesting statistic. Now, this is very recent. This is about a week ago. This poll found, and the question was, Israel's military response to Hamas is fully justified. This is the question. The percentage who say yes, it is fully justified, that are 65 years and older, is 81%. The percentage who say it's fully justified among 18 to 34-year-olds, young people, is 27%. 81 versus 27 by age, difference by age, only age. Now, what is a key difference between these two age groups? One of the key differences is where they get their news. 18 to 34-year-olds, if they have a TV, they're watching Netflix. They are not watching news on TV. They're getting their news from where? Social media. And that's the difference, because 65-year-olds are watching Fox News or even CNN. And the result is 81% think it's justified versus 27% among young people. Young people have also probably met a Palestinian or a Muslim at least. So relationships are important. Keep posting on social media, even if you have a small, network. It matters and it's making a difference. The fifth thing, and this is very obvious, but I'm going to repeat it, and everyone here here already knows this, never fall into anti-Semitism. are strong allies, and second, because it totally discredits you. Differentiate between the Israeli government and even its people. Even that kind of differentiation is important to me when you're addressing this audience. Say that Israelis deserve a responsible government that won't kill children in their name. 6, these are all things that we may, it takes a while, maybe it takes some time to think about. This is one that might be a bit controversial, but I'm still going to make it. Consider the hierarchy of needs. What do I mean by that? Israel talks about security, right? Security, security, security. And oftentimes, and this is falling right into their trap, the balance is Palestinian statehood versus Israeli security. Palestinian self-determination versus Israeli security. Now, I'm not saying anything's wrong with any of that, except this. If you are listening to that and you're, this fence-sitting American, what is a more basic need in the hierarchy of needs? There's nothing, after oxygen, there's nothing more basic than needing security. If we think the ceiling is about to fall on us, you're not going to be listening to anything I say. So when it's about security versus self-determination, which is the highest need in the hierarchy of needs, self-actualization, security will win every single time as more important. Whereas Palestinians are more insecure and lack physical and bodily and travel, they have the least security of all. And yet, oftentimes, it doesn't get talked about. So, it is beautiful to talk about statehood and self-determination. But it is the highest order need. And yet, Palestinians are completely deprived of their security. Palestinians have a right to security too. And Palestinians have a right to defend themselves. And we need to talk first and foremost, before anything else, about Palestinian security. So one of the things that you've probably heard in the news, because it's one of the key messaging pieces, is that the attacks of October 7th were 15 9/11s. I want to break this down to you so you understand where that comes from and hopefully how to counteract it. So you're bringing in a very triggering event to Americans. If you watch Israeli TV when they're, quote, talking to Gazans to tell them to evacuate, they speak in English. It's very strange. They speak in English to a people that they've cut off their phone, their internet, and their TV. They literally could not hear it if they wanted to and spoke English. So who is the message for? It's for us. It's for Americans. It's for the West. So the narrative war has at least as much resources devoted to it as the ground war and the bombs. So when you want to tell somebody, when you want to explain to somebody something being really, really bad, you start with something they think is bad, and you put it in those terms. You don't just give them raw numbers. It doesn't make any sense. We don't understand those things. We have to make it emotional. emotionally relevant to the listener. And yet, when you look at the numbers of those who have been killed in a population of 2 million, it is orders of magnitude higher. In fact, it would be at least 300 9/11s. And I've never heard anyone put it in those terms. We have to speak in a language that people understand in their terms. 7, you gain credibility by conceding a point. Concede that no one is perfect. Yes, in their desperation, mistakes are made. People want to secure their families from daily aggression. Like any human being, everyone, including Palestinians, make mistakes. This actually builds credibility. Refuse to defend or condemn Hamas, since you and I are not responsible for them. In fact, we must take righteous offense at being asked. If you are questioning if the killing of children offends me because of my ethnicity and religion, then it is you who owes me an apology. We can condemn in principle the targeting of non-combatants. But here's the thing, I do not fund Hamas. They do not answer to me and they do not check with me. But you and I do fund the IDF in the order of billions of US dollars. They should be accountable to us. Focus on the kids. Gaza has been called an open-air prison, but it is now an open-air children's graveyard. And don't be afraid to put it in those terms because it is true. And as Brother Osama very eloquently put it, focus on the harm of violence. You know, when people say and I heard, this is a talking point. We can't call for a ceasefire. This was 15 9/11s. When has violence made us safer? Are the actions of the US government that now today the majority of Americans say were a mistake in the invasion of Iraq or in Afghanistan, which we just left and the Taliban is ruling, did that work out? How did that work out for us? When has violence made anyone more safe? And then I shudder. If this is okay because of what has happened on October 7th, what would happen? What would happen if the Palestinians wanted to respond to something orders of magnitude worse than what Hamas did on October 7th? Emphasize how asymmetrical the situation is. And this is very important. There's a total asymmetry in military capability. You have a nuclear power against, if that, a militia. Resources. The difference in resources. This is an open-air prison against one of the most advanced militaries in the world. The asymmetry, especially in terms of body count, children killed. The other side wants to make it a conflict of two equal sides. and not a David and Goliath, which this document that was leaked, that I read, says that when it's explained as an asymmetrical assault, a David versus Goliath, that hurts Israel. Speak in terms of the need for equality. This word is a very powerful word among the American people. It's a value of this country, an espoused value, equality. That's why it went from gay marriage to marriage equality. That didn't happen for no reason. Equality is an incredibly powerful concept, and yet we hardly ever talk about equality when it comes to the Palestinians. Western audiences understand and value the concept of equality. Educate them on how unequal the situation is. Focus on the future and on what it looks like if we succeed. People need something to be working toward. Something to be for, not just what we're against. A prosperous Palestine. Muslim, Jewish, and Christian children playing safely together. Focus on the future. Emphasize the dissent of even Western government officials. So Josh Paul, who spent a decade in the State Department's bureau overseeing arms sales, resigned over the Gaza policy just a week ago. And then finally, and this is very important, give people a team to root for. And I'm sorry to put it in these terms as if we're playing a game, but I'm explaining to you how messaging actually works. Why do we hear so much about the amazing tech industry in Israel and all their amazing entrepreneurs and innovation? Because it makes people want to root for them. They're doing great things. We want to be on their team because they're cool. And it is that silly, yes. But Palestinians have so much to be proud of in terms of their ingenuity, their contribution to culture, to cuisine, to art, to poetry. Talk about the Palestinian accomplishments and contributions despite the neck-breaking oppression. That's a team people would want to stick with, that would want to root for. Frame Palestinians as brave survivors who won't give up their humanity. And this is actually just a fact, not just victims. Palestinian entrepreneurs, artists, and poets refuse to give up their humanity in the face of unbelievable oppression. So in summary, start with empathy for common humanity, common human needs of safety and justice, and then call for an end to apartheid. As even as the resources are, we have the most valuable resource of all, the truth. Let us present it to the world.